Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning to lift up and advance mobility solutions for our region. My name is Catherine Mattei, and I work at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, one of the many organizations that came together to organize this forum. I will be serving as the MC today and will be using my various sound effects to indicate that it is time to move on to the next speaker or item on the agenda. We have a very packed day, so we ask everyone to please follow the agenda as much as possible, but we don't want it to stifle creativity. To start off this morning's activities, I would like to introduce the force behind this event, Ms. Laura Sylvester, Legislative and Community Partnership Coordinator at the Food Bank of Western Mass.
Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Western Mass Transportation Forum. We're so excited to have everyone here. We do, as Catherine said, have a very packed agenda, so we are going to try and keep things moving along. Please help yourself to food if you haven't already. There's great food here, courtesy of State Street Fruit Store. So the idea for this forum is to convene a gathering of advocates, RTAs, legislators, planners, public transportation users, and anyone who's working on transportation issues. We want to report on our work, we want to share best practices, we want to envision the future, and we want to leverage our efforts for maximum policy outcomes and especially for coalition building. As you'll hear in the lightning rounds, there is great work being done in all 4 counties of Western Mass, and we want these programs that are being done to be replicable and for us to think boldly and creatively about how to improve public transportation in our region. I'd like to start by thanking our funders. A very, very big thank you to Bay State Health, Transportation for Massachusetts, Live Well Springfield and the Mass Public Health Institute, Cooley Dickinson Hospital, Coalition to End Hunger, and the UMass School of Public Health and Health Sciences, my alma mater. Thank you. So thanks to them, we were able to provide this delicious food from State Street and also to offer childcare downstairs. We also want to thank the Northampton Center for the Arts for hosting us and to NCTV for filming. We also, of course, want to thank our legislators for being here. Every single Western Mass elected official put their name on this event as a convener. And we are very grateful for their support, and we are grateful for their I especially want to thank Senator Lesser, who's going to give our keynote address, and Senator Comerford, Rep. Sabadoza, and Rep. Play, who were all on my planning committee and who have done very hard work to make this forum happen. This forum is a result of 6 months of planning by a dedicated committee. You can find their names in the program that we gave you when you came in. Please take a look, and most of them are here. If you see them, thank them. And just to set the tone, I'd like to read to you the value statement that the committee put together at one of our early planning meetings. We're talking about transportation planning and transportation in general. And these are the values that underlie this forum today. People deserve to be able to meet their basic needs of transportation, housing, and food. Transportation is a right. Transportation planning should include reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It should promote healthy lifestyles like walking and biking as an alternative to vehicles. And it should be accessible to seniors and people with disabilities. Our hope is that working groups will emerge from these discussions to carry this momentum forward. So if you are interested, please put your name on the piece of paper that is on each table. We will discern which area that you're interested in working in. We will form working groups, and we will be in touch after the forum to make that happen. So just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. Bathrooms are across the hall. The word cloud is happening here. I'm going to have come up in a minute and just say a word about that. If you need to be on Wi-Fi, there's really good Wi-Fi here. It's Holly Street Guest. There's no password. You can just sign right in. And then please, at the end of the day, fill out your evaluations. It will really help us to plan for the next one. So I'm going to bring Andy up to say a few words about the word cloud, and then we will turn it back over to Catherine, and we will be getting started. So thanks again.
And we have a seat up here. We just come up and take the seats in the front row if you want to sit down. Those are in the back.
All right, thank you. My name is Andy McCall. I'm a planner with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. We've developed this word cloud kind of basically for us, and we're collecting data today for you. Hopefully it will help stimulate conversation. We've got 23 responses so far. We have an iPad here, and you can simply use your smartphone, go to menti.com, enter that 6-digit number, and the question will pop up, and you can easily enter your comments for there. 25 characters a piece, you can enter 3 comments. And this data is really, we're going to be able to use afterwards. We're going to be able to extract this out and use it. We'll be able to distribute it to the organizers. This code is only good for 4 hours, so if we'd like to remain up longer than that, simply we'll just have to regenerate it and you can email it out. But so the more answers we get, the more data we'll have, the more we appreciate it. Thank you.
So again, please feel free to come up and sit if you'd like to. Thank you, Andy and Laura. Getting around Western Massachusetts is not that difficult if one has access to a personal vehicle. But for people who rely on transit, the story is different. I would like to introduce Jeff Singleton and Winston Smith. Jeff Singleton was born in 1947 and is a child of the 60s. He has a PhD in history from Boston University with a published dissertation on welfare policy in the 1930s. He has served on a variety of Montague town committees, including the Finance Committee, the School Committee, and Regional Transit Board, since moving out here from Somerville in 1998. He taught history at the college level for 25 years and now writes for the Montague Reporter. He rode public transit all the time in Metro Boston and still does out here, but was astonished by the narrow socioeconomic base of public transit out here. It's a car culture, but there used to be trolleys and trains going all over the place. Where is Mr. Singleton? Oh, thank you. And then, why don't you come up here? And then Winston Smith is, hang on a second, is a resident health advocate. Mr. Smith, are you here too? Winston, come on up. Winston Smith is a resident health advocate with the Live Well Springfield Coalition. Winston volunteers with the Live Well Springfield Age and Dementia Friendly Initiative to assess transportation and housing needs for older adults in the city of Springfield. Winston has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and is a former teacher with the Springfield Public Schools.
So I'm Jeff Singleton, and the 5 minutes I've got here, half of it's going to be the same speech I always give, so some of you have probably already heard it. It's a little iconoclastic in terms of what was just said. I was just looking up here, what's my biggest problems? Yeah, actually, the system really works well for me. I live in actually Turners Falls. Took the bus down here, took Route 23 from Turners Falls down to Sunderland, took the Sunderland bus down to UMass and took the B43 here. So many people, they would immediately go, oh, isn't that demanding? Nobody's going to do that. I thought it was great. I read the New York Times. I talked to people on the bus. I was relaxed. I didn't have to drive. There's huge virtues to riding public transportation. My problem here is that there's not enough people like me, and I actually am a low-income person. I'm mostly living off of Social Security at this point. There are not enough people like me. There's not enough of the middle class taking the bus. That's my personal opinion. I came here from Somerville. I was a heavy-duty bus train rider in Somerville, and I saw poor people on the bus, which is a hugely important constituency, obviously. I saw disabled people on the bus. I saw middle-class people. I saw rich people reading the Wall Street Journal on the bus. There was a broad base for the public transit system in Boston. I think one of the problems I have noticed with the FRTA system, and I'm not blaming anybody for this, is that it doesn't have that base. It's mostly dedicated to low-income people going back from Turner's Falls to Orange to Greenfield, essentially. And that's huge. I mean, that may be the most important thing we do, and I do it all the time, but I think it means very low ridership, and it means the system is heavily stigmatized. So my basic problem is we need more people to take the bus, and we need more people to do what I did today, and the key issue for me is how do we do that? There's a lot of complicated policy questions involving the organization of the bus service and how and where it should go and what the priorities should be and how you evaluate that. In 5 minutes, I can't get into all that, but I actually think all these things kind of matter, and it's important to get people involved in transportation planning to do all that. A couple other quick comments. I have a little bit of concern. We recently had an evaluation of the regional transit authorities. What was that called, Michael? That whole thing we went through in the fall, last spring and stuff with the state. And now the regional transit authorities have signed a memorandum of understanding with the state, as I understand it. And I'm very concerned about that based on some of the comments I heard at another regional transit meeting. I mean, what are the goals of that? You know, is the goal to expand the base of the public transportation? Is it just to expand what we've already got, et cetera? As far as I know, it was kind of a top-down thing, and there was no public input to that. So I'm on the advisory board, or the oversight board of the Regional Transit Authority, and I think we need to push to look at that and see if it conforms, what the goals are going to be, and if the data analysis in that conforms to the goals. I think that's huge. One of the biggest issues we have up in the FRTA is that we are only transit authority of the state without any weekend service. This is probably the single biggest complaint we hear, yes, consistently. I share that. My personal opinion is we need to sit down with our legislators and develop a somewhat more detailed lobbying strategy to actually make that happen, because it seems like we complain, and then nothing is in the budget, and then, oh, that didn't get in the budget this year, we need a strategy. My only concern about that, and maybe I'll leave it here for a little bit, but I think that's a reform and a crucial one for the existing base of the system. It is not necessarily going to expand the base of the system, which I think should be the #1 goal. One other quick comment, we refer to rural transit. I don't know what the title of this meeting is, but people talk about rural transit all the time. And I think that's a little misleading, because what these systems do actually is they go from medium-sized or small towns to small cities. They go from Greenfield to Turner's Falls to Orange to UMass, which has 25,000 students. They go to the community college. They go to the population centers mostly. I mean, it's not like these buses are going off to a farm somewhere, picking up a couple of farmers. So I think, and we're always complaining that nobody in the eastern part of the state understands this. I think that I'm not against, I don't want to micromanage anybody's language, but I think the problems we face to expand the basic transit system have to do with how to get more people living in the small population centers we have, not buying 2 or 3 cars, not buying a new car for their kid, and being willing to take the public transit system. So that's what I believe.
I've been reminded to tell you all hashtag Western Mass News if you want to tweet about what we're doing, or Instagram or whatever.
Okay, so I'm Winston, and the gentleman.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Okay, I think you can hear me. Okay, good stuff. Initially, when Samantha asked me to come here and speak, and she told me about the people who are represented here, I was like, this is a target-rich environment. And I could come here and speak truth to power. But I thought about that. carefully. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to come here, aim for the jugular, and piss people off. So there goes that truth and power thing. The way I got involved with Liberal Springfield is because I did some litigation. I filed complaints with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination against the PVTA, and also against the place where I was staying, the Worthington Street Shelter. So because I've done litigation, I've gone to file complaints. When I heard what Liberal Springfield was doing in terms of housing and transportation, I was like, this is a natural fit, let me jump on board. So that's how I'm doing it, and I'm still engaged in that whole process of trying to do activism, advocacy, and litigation to make sure that my rights are secured. Saying that, I know I only have 5 minutes, but I really want to do the whole 4 hours or whatever it is. I want to give you like a Fidel Castro-like speech. But anyway, they said, I think it was Hegel, because I'm giving props to the man that preceded me, that when Hegel looked out of his window and saw Napoleon, he said, there goes history on a horse. Maybe I'm making it up, I don't know. But that's transportation, horse and buggy days. And part of the reason why I'm saying that is also because when Russia invaded Crimea, Secretary of State John Kerry came out and said that this is 19th century behavior in the 21st century, and that's also transportation when you are invading a country. I'm trying to go from the abstract, big level to get down to the local level, which is I had to have these schedules to get from Springfield, Worthington Street Shelter, 2011 to 2017. So my journey was from Springfield, from the shelter to the Amherst Survival Center on a daily basis, because I wanted to know what was going on. I think Trump came on and said he wanted to know what's going on with all these terrorists and Muslims and all that. I wanted to know what was going on in white people's community while we had a black president in the White House. So that was my transportation journey. There's a big gap now, pause, because I'm trying to go through my notes here and figure out what it was. All right, so I don't want to take up your time, but when I was in the shelter, two things were concerning. Part of what led me to go to the MCAD was a fellow kept using the S word to describe Hispanics and the N word to describe black people, and then he started calling white folks white trash, so he wanted to identify himself as an equal opportunity hater. All right, so knowing that I was in this environment with people like this, I was like, any chance I get, I'm gonna sue. I got that opportunity after somebody went into my room and stole my backpack. And when I wrote that letter to the director of the shelter, I also carbon copied James Comey, FBI director. I think he got spooked when I went down to the FBI office and started asking him why didn't he follow up on my letter. I went down in Springfield. So anyway, that's the housing piece. The transportation piece is hearing a white woman on a PVTA bus. Like I said, my journey is from Springfield to Amherst Survival Center. And she had a biracial daughter, and she'd be using the N-word, and I was concerned. So when Michael Brown got shot down in Ferguson, and I'm on PVTA, I'm like, this is really concerning. How do I get a suit? So eventually, I did file a suit. So the way I'm using transportation is different. I'm not worried. I know where my destination is. I know where I'm coming from. But my ultimate goal in using public transportation from 2011 to 2017 is to create a beloved environment. And you can't create a beloved environment if you have a bunch of equal opportunity haters around. So how do I address that issue? That was my overriding concern, and that's my right to different people. And Senator Sylvester got CC'd on one of the letters that I wrote, and this is the first time I'm in his presence. Just like when I wrote to the Secretary of State, John Kerry, he never replied. Of course he's not going to reply.
I'm right here.
I'm a word here, but John Kerry is not. So in me doing transportation, I think I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop because I have too much to say and I want to use up the whole time, and a lot of people would be very annoyed if I were to do that. So I'm going to stop here by talking another issue about transportation. I was going up to Greenfield one day, I think it was in 2008 or so, with my son, and the state police pulled me over. That's when I had private transportation, my own vehicle. And he pulled me over and he said, stay in the right lane when the right lane is available. And my son is in the car, and he's like, why? Everybody else is in the left lane. And he's only 8 years old. And I was like, I need to ditch my car. Luckily, I ditched it, because you know what happened after 2008 to all kinds of black men driving vehicles. I'm not saying it happened around here, but there was a lot of forethought in the things that I've done. That's one thing. And I'm going to end with questions. How many of you remember the Millennium Development Goals? How many of you remember question 2 on the 2002 ballot? What does it say? And the last thing is, how is the Homeland Security Act of 2002 related to the Nuremberg laws? I know there are attorneys here. I want you to think about those 3 questions. I'm going to end by saying, when I think about transportation, I'm thinking about cattle cars to concentration camps. And I'm thinking about the migrant peoples who are being locked up by this country. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singleton and Mr. Smith. You all have in your packets a lengthy biography of our keynote speaker, Senator Eric Lesser. So I'm not going to take the time to read it because we're a little bit behind on our schedule, but please give a warm welcome to Senator Eric Lesser.
So formal, keynote address. Wow, I'm not sure what that means exactly, but good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Lesser. Thanks for inviting me north to Northampton to share with you some thoughts on transportation. Before we kind of dive in, and we've got a lot of ground to cover, I do want to just first say thank you to everybody who's here. I want to say thank you to our organizers. I want to say thank you to the other participants and speakers, and certainly to the Food Bank of Western Mass for putting this on. And I want to give an acknowledgement. I'm a guest here. I don't have the honor of representing Northampton, although we do work as a team in Western Mass. I'm a guest here of our delegation in Northampton, which is led by Senator Comerford and Representative Sabadosa, who are great advocates. And there's really a team effort here in Western Mass. We're about 12% of the state's population. So the 4 counties of Western Mass really need to work together to make sure that we're getting our needs met, or at least doing what we can to get our needs met on Beacon Hill. And so I just want to acknowledge and recognize the delegation that's here. The Dean of the Western Mass delegation, Joe Wagner from Chicopee, We nicknamed Joe the Western Mass Speaker, but he's the Assistant Majority Leader on the State House. We appreciate you, Joe, and a former Chair of the Transportation Committee in the House. I see Rep. Natalie Blay. Of course, my friend and colleague from the Senate, Senator Hines. We mentioned Rep. Sabadosa and Senator Comerford as well. And I want to welcome, of course, Tricia Farley-Bouvier from Pittsfield. We appreciate you, Tricia. And am I missing anyone? Dan Carey was here, State Rep. Dan Carey, and I know Pat Duffy from Rep. Vega's office. Oh, and Mindy. Where is Mindy? Oh, she just left. But yeah, of course, Rep. Mindy Dom. So who's a great friend and a great ally. And Mindy and I share Granby, so we work together on quite a lot. So let's give a round of applause to our specifically, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work of the food bank and really so many partners in this room who do so much. And we really have a good story to tell about the progress that's been made around food insecurity issues. First, MFAP, Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program, which purchases produce and fresh vegetables and other items from local farms in Massachusetts, supporting our rural economies, supporting our agricultural base here in Western Mass, and then distributing that to food pantries all over the state. Food Bank of Western Mass, a great partner, great champion on that effort. The funding for that item is now at $20 million, which we're very excited about. We want more. We're going to continue to fight for more, but it's been a team effort on the part of the delegation to get that funding. Also, a very important HIP, Healthy Incentives Program. We're able to get the funding up again for the HIP program this year. There's a hope now that we're going to be able to do that year-round, farmers market access for HIP. I know in the Springfield Farmers Market at Forest Park that I represent, they have a winter market all year round. This is essential. My family's a regular visitor, but really the whole community goes there. The whole region goes there, and having that year-round access is going to be absolutely essential. I'd also mention that our food pantries really did heroic work during the government shutdown this year, and Senator Comerford deserves a lot of credit for really stepping up as a brand new senator and bringing that to the forefront. Rest assured, in Massachusetts, we don't shut our state government down when there's a political disagreement. Well, we won't get into that right now, but our food banks really did step up, so we're grateful to you. And we do have a really fun and active food policy caucus. Myself, Senator Comerford, and Senator Goby on the Senate side co-chair that effort. It's a really great group. We're very active. We just sent a letter out around SNAP benefits and SNAP access. So if you're interested in engaging with us on that, or even coming to one of the caucus sessions, please reach out to us. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and thank Chris from Tea for Mass, and Easterners among us. Chris Dempsey has made the trip from Eastern Mass, and they've done a great job really making Tea for Mass a statewide transit advocacy group, which is very, very important. So, at first when I got the invitation, I wondered to myself, well, this is, why is the Food Bank of Western Mass hosting a forum on transportation? At first blush, it might not seem like an obvious connection. But the reality of it is we can fund MFAP limitlessly. We could build food pantries everywhere. We could make ourselves blue in the face, red in the face, working on food security and hunger access issues. But if we don't solve the underlying issues, which were eloquently spoken about just before me, we're going to continue to see the same issues over and over. We're going to continue to see the needs go up. And that underlying issue is an economy that is not sharing prosperity, is not sharing access, is not sharing wealth with enough people, and is not doing it for enough of our families in all of our communities. That is the key. It's about growth. It's about sustainable growth. It's about broad-based growth and job creation that touches all of our communities. And you cannot do that without investments in transportation. This is intuitive. People need to be able to get to their jobs. They need to be able to get to their doctor's appointments. They need to be able to get to school. Businesses need to be able to locate here and get their goods in and out. It's about growing the economy and doing it in a sustainable way. Wealthy people will always have Uber, they'll always have cars, they'll always have private transportation to get them around. It's the investments in trains, in buses, in public transit that opens the doors for people and creates growth. So that's what I'm here to talk about. I'm going to try to go fast because we have a lot of ground to cover, and I'd hopefully like to take some questions if we can. It's becoming almost a truism, and Chris can probably chime in on this, that this buzzword about us being in a transportation crisis is being said over and over again. Well, quite frankly, Western Mass has had a transportation crisis forever, but we're going to get to that in a second. In Eastern Mass, though, there is ground shifting, and you do sense a political change happening where people are acknowledging how bad it really is. So just a few things I want to share with you. People probably saw or read about the new congestion report that MassDOT has issued. By the way, a result of advocacy from T4Mass and statewide group of legislators that forced the governor to do this study in last year's budget bill. The study came back and told us what we already know, which is that nobody can get around and the traffic is worse than it's ever been. But there are two data points in there that are very important. First, 2/3 of the roads in Eastern Mass are completely congested by 4 p.m. every single day. 64%, I think is the exact number, of the roads in the Metro Boston area are completely congested every single day. And this is the report saying this, not me, so that we are in a, quote, point of no return in Eastern Mass around congestion issues and around traffic. It's not just limited, obviously, to cars and to our highways. Mass Inc. just came out with a study on commuter rail access. You know, in the old era, wealthier people lived farther out from the city, and it was wealthier, higher income families that were using commuter rail and were less price sensitive to changes to the pricing of the commuter rail passes. Well, that's changed now. Now the most expensive real estate is closer to the city, and you're seeing people getting displaced, moving farther out, now having to rely on commuter rail when they used to be able to walk or take the core T service, and the commuter rail passes are very expensive, and the prices are going up and up. I really encourage people to check out this report, which talks about the lack of access in our gateway cities to getting basic transportation to go to work. Another massive study that came out a few months ago showed that at this point, 1/3 of people in Metro Boston have considered moving out of the region entirely because of the lack of transportation and because of the traffic and because of the lack of access. So the result, what's the result? It exacerbates the gentrification and the housing crisis because people need to live farther and farther and farther away, which puts more and more and more pressure on the commuter rail system, on the T, and on the roads, which makes the basically lottery ticket of having a house close to work all that much more valuable, which jacks the price up even more and continues the cycle at an even stronger rate. That is what we need to focus on. That is the cycle that we need to work on breaking. And so now I want to connect this to the transportation crisis in Western Mass, which is not exactly a new crisis. We've basically had no transportation in Western Mass for a long time. Although I do want to give a shout out to Sandra, who I see in the crowd, who's the administrator of the PVTA. They've really done incredible work with very limited resources. And we're grateful to you, Sandra, and to your team. And we're going to continue to work to give you the support you need. Which brings me to a segue on regional transit authorities. It's like we want to pull our hair out as a delegation listening to this debate sometimes. Because I love the MBTA. We all want a strong, vibrant MBTA. But there are a lot of other public transit authorities in our state. And in fact, the PVTA, and I know that the FRTA shares this area as well, and the Berkshires has an RTA, but I'm personally most familiar with the work of the PVTA because I represent Springfield and Chicopee. The PVTA is the second largest transit authority in the state. You wouldn't know that by the state press coverage of the transportation issues, but the PVTA is the second largest. And by the way, as we talk about social justice issues and civil rights issues, the PVTA, Sandra, correct me if these statistics are a little bit off, 2/3 of the PVTA ridership are people of color, 2/3 are people with low incomes or at risk of severe poverty, and 2/3, roughly, have no other option if the service gets cut, do not have cars or regular access to cars. So when the service gets cut, when the lines get cut, people are quite literally stranded. In Franklin County, there's no weekend service with the RTAs at all. And in fact, just shortly after these remarks, I'm going to be with the state auditor, who just released a report that, again, I would encourage everyone to check out, which talks about access to WIC and access to our supplemental nutrition programs. And there's just two things that I want to leave people with about that audit, which is pretty stunning. First is that you need to go to in-person visits in order to qualify, which is its own policy debate, which we can't get to everything, but it requires an in-person visit to qualify for WIC assistance. Infants need to visit the WIC office 4 times a year. In Western Mass, in all 4 counties, Hampden, Hampshire, Franklin, and Berkshire, there are significant numbers of people who qualify for the help but live more than 20 miles from the location that they have to go to. I mean, my family, we have 2 little kids. When my daughters were infants, it's like we could barely get around the street without, Patton's army mobilizing to move them around. I can't even imagine families having to travel 20 miles with no car, no access, 4 times a year with their little babies, and the FRTA not able, it's not their fault, the state isn't supporting them, able to get the weekend or after-hour service, the PVTA struggling to keep up with that rural service. Very, very important. So what are we doing about it? And what's coming up in the next year? Well, I want to celebrate and acknowledge really a decades-long effort that culminated with the new Valley Flyer North-South service. I know Joe was on the first ride, and Lindsay was on it, and Natalie. So there was a big team to kick that off. This is really the potential for a real game changer for us, connecting the spine of the Pioneer Valley, Greenfield, Holyoke, Northampton, Springfield, and then on into Connecticut. It's a pilot. We have 2 years to make it work. Quite frankly, I'm worried about how this is structured and how MassDOT has structured the fares. But we need to work together as a team, as a community, as Western Mass, to lift up this project, to show them that there's demand, that there's support for it. And we're going to continue to advocate to expand that service, because it's very, very important. I also would be remiss if I didn't bring up the Connecticut rail service, which really deserves some recognition, because a lot of our community members work in Connecticut. In fact, I have about 15,000 constituents every single day who cross the border into the greater Hartford area to work, and vice versa. People from Hartford who are coming up to Springfield and to points north of Springfield to work. Connecticut Rail has been a huge success, connecting New Haven, Hartford, and Springfield into Springfield's Union Station. The first year came back, and they were actually above their estimates for ridership in the first year. Now we're working to expand that access, get even more trains, get even more regular commuter service, and we've been working with the PVTA to provide last mile connectivity and radio service around Union Station so that people can get connected even to their local neighborhoods and to their local employers once the train drops them off in Union Station. And of course, I need to spend a little bit of time talking about East-West Rail. I brought up at the beginning the sort of trend line we've seen between Eastern Mass and Western Mass. East-West Rail is going to solve both issues in both ends of the state. This is not a project for Western Mass. It's not a pet project for Springfield or for Pittsfield or Worcester. This is a statewide project that will transform the economy of our entire state. The single biggest challenge that the Boston area is facing right now from an economic development point of view is the out-of-control cost of housing, the out-of-control gentrification you've seen, and the breakdown of the ability for anybody to move around anywhere, whether it's by car, by boat, by train, by bus, you name it. Eventually, jobs and opportunity are going to leave the Metro Boston area because nobody can get around and no normal person can afford to live there. I see the rents and my jaw drops at even the most modest accommodations, what they're asking of people. Western Mass really in many ways is an inverse challenge. We have fantastic quality of life, we have a lot to offer, but our economy is not growing enough to keep pace with the growth we're seeing in Eastern Mass. As a result, our communities are losing population. People feel like they have to move out of Western Mass in order to find a good job and support for their family. East-West Rail is going to solve both of those issues. MassDOT is about 50% of the way done, and I see our team from Chester, I see our team from Palmer. There are some commitments that as a delegation we're going to make. There needs to be a stop in Palmer. There needs to be a stop in Palmer. And there needs to be, and I think Adam is here and he will back me up on this, and Tricia, there needs to be rail service from Pittsfield to Springfield. Not a transfer bus. It needs to be rail. And that's going to be what we fight for. MassDOT did provide about 6 alternatives in a preliminary report that they gave us in Springfield a couple weeks ago. And one of the options was an 80-minute trip 16 times a day between Springfield and Boston. So it's a PowerPoint slide, so it's a long way to go. But I just want people to think about that for a second. Imagine if we had a one-seat ride, 80 minutes, from Springfield's Union Station to Boston South Station 16 times a day. Think about what that would do for our communities. You combine that with the North-South Valley Flyer service. Now Northampton is connected to Boston by rail. Greenfield is connected to Boston by rail. Hartford is connected to Boston by rail, which currently it isn't. Pittsfield is connected to Springfield by rail, which right now, on paper, there's a service, but nobody really uses it because it's not realistic. So the possibilities really are endless. So we can't stop the advocacy. And it's been bipartisan. We've worked with the business community. The proposals in the Senate have passed unanimously year after year with both parties supporting it. So we're going to keep at it. So I know I'm probably over, but I just want to zoom out for a second and just talk about some core economic issues that I think are so essential and are inextricably tied to the work of the food bank and to the work of transportation advocates. I want to just ask for a show of hands. How many people here either grew up or have lived in Western Mass for a long time and have kids, grandkids, siblings, neighbors, classmates who you grew up with, or you raised, or were part of your community here, who have had to move because they needed to find a better job elsewhere? Yeah, basically everyone. How can we continue with an economic trend that vacuums the jobs and the opportunity out of our communities and hyper-concentrates them in a handful of zip codes that, by the way, aren't good for, that trend isn't good for those zip codes either, because it pushes the people who have been living there out also. That is the core issue that we need to focus on, and that is why the transportation investments are so important. I represent a wild district. It's so fun. It's one of the most diverse districts in really every way. I have 9 communities. I have rural communities, urban communities. I have some of the densest communities in the state. I have communities that don't have a stoplight. I have some of the wealthiest communities, some of the lowest income communities. I have industrial areas and a Tier 1 research university, multiple colleges and multiple factories. But one thing that unites every single community in my district when we travel around, and it's true for all of our communities, is this. People don't feel like their kids and their grandkids are going to get the same chance that they got. And so that's why we're here. And that's what this is really all about. We need to hit the singles and doubles. We need to get the job training programs open. We need to do the basic things every day that have kept the Western Mass economy in decent shape. But if we really want the growth, if we really want to lift tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty, if we want to really begin to attract new investment and new opportunity for everyone that's broadly shared, we need to do the big things. And we need to invest in the transformational projects. We need rail access, regular, fast rail access to New York City. We need regular, fast rail access up and down the Connecticut River. We need statewide rail connecting all the major cities and less major cities of Western Mass to each other so people can get to work and can get around. And I'll just close on issues of the cost, because you can't have a responsible conversation about this unless you have a conversation about how you pay for it. And so there's just a couple things I want to say about the cost. Number one, all of us as a delegation take the votes every year, and they're often unpleasant votes for our constituents, to fund the MBTA. We take the votes to fund the Big Dig Dam. It's our sales tax, in part, that funds the MBTA. And you know what? We're proud to do that because we understand that those investments are essential for a Commonwealth-wide economy that's healthy and that's strong. But we need some self-esteem as a region to say that the trend of everything getting sucked out of here and getting sent there is not going to stand anymore. And as a region, we need statewide investment that's going to help lift our families in Western Mass alongside the families in the Metro Boston area that have been getting that transportation investment for a very long time. Second thing I want to say about this is we need to have an honest conversation about revenue and about how our tax system works and about how the tax burden has gone up for lower income and middle income people while it's gone down for the highest income people. And so Adam, not to put him on the spot, Adam chairs our revenue committee and is running a very important, robust examination of this and how we're going to rebalance our tax system to make sure that we're putting those investments where they need to be. And the final thing, that's my cue maybe, the final thing I will say is this. No one is deluding ourselves that this will be expensive. Yes, it's going to be expensive. But the question I want to leave everybody with is, what is the cost of not doing it? The food bank knows the cost. All of you know the cost. We know the cost. The cost is our families not living out their God-given potential. It's Western Mass continuing to get left behind. That's expensive too. So we need to be proud about standing up and making the case that these investments are worth it as a down payment on the next generation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Senator Lesser. This thing, I'm going to stand on my toes. So now we're transitioning to our lightning rounds. And again, we're a little bit behind on our schedule, so I would like to call up the first 4 lightning round presenters, Wendy Crom, Tina Cody, Dana Roscoe, and Gail Farnsworth French. If you could just come up and line up here. So, what do I have to do with this thing? This one? Yeah. So the way this is going to go, it's a modified Pecha Kucha. So instead of it's about 25, it's half of it. So everybody keep yourselves to 5 minutes. We're going to have 4 of the presentations. Then we'll have questions for those first 4, and then we're going to have 5 more questions, and then we're going to get into the work groups. So again, I'm not going to read their bios because they're in your packets and we're behind, but Wendy Crom is with the Berkshire Interfaith Organization Volunteer Driver Program for Health-Related Activities.
Thank you especially to all of the organizers, especially Food Bank of Western Mass, for putting this forum on. Great to see everyone here. Food Bank of Western Massachusetts is always on the forefront of organizing around food and recognizing that connection with transportation. So my name is Wendy Crum. I'm the lead organizer for BIO, Berkshire Interfaith Organizing. And so a couple of other pieces I wanted to say. You'll see another logo up there, Age Friendly Berkshires. They're one of our partners. And I'm repurposing some slides from a presentation that Peg McDonough from Age Friendly Berkshires and Berkshire Regional Planning Commission and I did about our partnering work together in the Berkshires. And then today I've been asked to specifically focus on the volunteer driver program that we're working to build. And so these first slides, we're going to really lightning round. Okay, I'll tell you when. I think I just wanted to make the shout out to Peg, because I don't know if she's here today, but I emailed her to let her know I'm repurposing. Next slide. Also wanted to say a quick, you can go to the next slide, yeah. A quick shout out to both Senator Lesser actually for picking this up, and also Senator Hines for co-sponsoring and continuing the work on the regional transportation ballot initiatives, because we do recognize that by bringing together our resources within our own communities, we are 32 municipalities in Berkshire County, and if we're able to levy tax together to be able to keep resources in the Berkshires to fund some of our Berkshire-based transportation and transit initiatives, that's one way that we can move forward, and that's still, I believe, in committee. But I wanted to place us here. Remember, so we've got 4 counties of Western Massachusetts. The red one is Berkshire County. Look how far out there we are. And our state capital, of course, is way over here on this other side. So we know in Western Mass, we often this has already been addressed by some of the earlier speakers, we feel a little distant from our state capital in Western Mass. So think of you're in Western Mass, and now imagine you're in far west Mass, Berkshire County. We're closer to Albany than we are to Springfield. So surrounded by Vermont, Connecticut, and New York, just to place us. You can go to the next slide. I want to thank Mr. Singleton, the first speaker today, for talking about rural transit as a misnomer, that it really connects the sort of population centers, right? Our transit connects we've got only 2 cities and 30 towns, small towns in the Berkshires. And so we have a large town, Great Barrington, in the south. So there's sort of 3 population centers, and that's where the transit, the fixed route, really goes. And so if you're living in one of the hill towns, on one of those 2,101 miles of road, I think I could get all the way out to Colorado on that, right? And 2 minutes left. Okay, I'm going to get to the volunteer driver program piece. But anyway, we have a large area to cover with very limited resources for transit. So moving on, you can move on to the next slide. We are so automobile dependent because transit can't do it all. We have to fill in. So that's why looking at solutions that are going to work for our rural areas. My organization has 19 member groups that are congregations. And so we're really looking at ways of using the cars that are on the road to get people to where they need. So it supplements what exists for transit. And the one other piece I really want to make about this, Senator Lesser had made this point, that it really is an economic justice issue. Particularly out here in the West and in the rural areas, the people who use transit really are not using the transit because they don't want to pay for parking or avoid the congestion on the roads. It's because they can't afford to keep a car on the road, right? So I appreciated those statistics about 2/3 of the population that use it use transit are low income. I'm sure it's maybe even higher. You can go through the next one. That last quick slide was about BRTA. Again, just transit challenges, which lead us to how are we going to be able to fill in the rest of getting to the places that are not just in Pittsfield or North Adams or Great Barrington, for example. You can move on through these 2 slides are both about sort of the mission of BIO, Berkshire Interfaith Organizing, which I'm not really here to talk about BIO in specific today. If anyone's interested, I think the contact information is in there and I can send more information. But our main transportation goal is really working to increase the public and private transportation options that are available in Berkshire County and to increase access to jobs and medical care and affordable, nutritious food for all of our residents. These are some of the campaigns that we've run over the years. I'm not going to go through them in specific because I wanted to focus on the volunteer driver program. I'm so happy Transportation for Massachusetts is represented here. Thank you. We had a grant for $10,000 to put toward developing a volunteer driver program. And I think that I want to just say very quickly, you can go to the last slide, which is about the program, the partners that are involved in the volunteer driver program. Some of the lessons we learned, the first one is having the right partners at the table can really move things forward. This is a list of our partners. I'm not going to go through it. We've got great need. We knew that already. The insurance issue is not a deal killer. It's some of the work that we're, some of the research that we've found, the resources that we've found that are available are retired senior volunteer program, the one that's listed last there actually should in some ways be moved to the front of the list because they have an existing, okay, I'm sorry. They have an existing volunteer driver program that we're looking to expand, and that the whole thing costs less than you might think, and that the process works best when every organization provides what it does best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So there will be time to explore with Wendy in the work sessions. So next we have Tina.
Good morning. Happy Friday the 13th. I feel like this is one of those mornings where I wish I drank coffee because I kind of feel like I'm on some sort of on some sort of game show with this 5-minute timer going on here. So I want to start off my presentation with talking a little bit about funding. How many of you in here get excited about budget time? I tend to use the words like anxious, frustrating, and maybe even a little depressing to describe what the process is like, not only for myself, but for some of our fellow RTA members. That's because we don't have a dedicated source of funding that we have from year to year, and we often find ourselves crossing our fingers that we're successful in balancing the budget. For the current fiscal year in FY20, the RTAs have an approved budget of $92.5 million. Out of this, $87 million is the base in which the 15 transit authorities will rely on for this fiscal year. The remaining $3.5 million was given to MassDOT in discretionary funds, and they're tasked with distributing it to us. As we near the close of the first quarter of this fiscal year, we still don't have an MOU in place, and we still don't have an understanding of what each of us will get when those MOUs are dispersed. Last year's discretionary funding was $4.5 million, and that wasn't released until May of 2019, which was about a month before our fiscal year ended. So while we appreciate the additional funding and all of the work that the task force put into this effort, these discretionary funds are only good for 1 year. It makes it extremely difficult for us to plan for any new future service, and equally difficult for our passengers to plan for and rely on consistent service from year to year. And that's critical for us if we're going to increase our ridership. Next slide. So in terms of trying to incentivize new passengers into our system, we've done a few things to put into place to hopefully boost some of our ridership. We've piggybacked onto what the PVTA has done on Tuesdays by offering our free fare senior program. We have offered free fares the day after Thanksgiving. We have participated in the annual Dump the Pump in June every year, and if you give me a little bit more time, I'm sure I can come up with more days that I can offer free fares, which will help come to fruition the vision I have of just having a free fare system for transit authorities in general. One of the things that we did last December, which is new and we plan on and continue to do this year, is we randomly went to various fixed route stops along all of our service areas and we gifted individuals with bus passes. It could be a free unlimited bus pass for the month. It could be $5, $25, $10. It's amazing the response that we got, not only from our staff and our passengers, but just in general. We had people hugging us, people that were brought to tears. It was just really powerful to see the impact that that had. One of the things that we came up with is our New Freedoms Bus Pass program. It's made possible by the New Freedom federal funding. We may not have been very creative in naming the program, but we did get a little creative when it came to assisting members of our community that are in recovery from substance use disorders and in need of transportation. So we offer a 2-month unlimited bus pass to persons that qualify for these services. Once that is expired, they come back into the FRTA office and we give them another 2-month unlimited bus pass. This allows us to discuss future transportation options with them and get feedback regarding how the passes were used. Individuals have used these passes to get to employment training, social service events, medical appointments, and to their jobs. This was something that was fairly easy to implement. And again, one more way that maybe we can introduce ourselves into that no-fare system I was talking about. For the 3rd year in a row, the FRTA is hosting, next slide, is hosting a system-wide service orientation for our human service agencies. So at this event, we discuss everything FRTA. It's kind of Transit 101. We provide a system-wide overview. We review how to read schedules. We talk about our Go Card, our mobile service app. We have a planning trip exercise. It's proved to be extremely successful and allows us a chance to work with our community partners, establishing networks that connect social service agencies, local businesses, schools, and medical facilities. Next slide. I'll talk briefly about the partnerships that we've created under our demand response program with various councils on aging. I know Kate's here. We partner with the Hilltown CDC, Hume's Transportation. Essentially, we lease our vehicles to these individual agencies, and we set their program up with them, giving them a budget in which they have to stay within, but they dictate how the hours of service are and what the routes are traveled, and of course, the days that we provide service. There's still some restrictions in terms of what we can use the vehicles for. But again, it's another way for us to form partnerships within our region and get networking out. We have also partnered with...
That's your signal.
That's my signal, wow. Okay, we've also partnered with Big Y, Stop and Shop, and programs like Life Path in order to help them have us supplement our budgets. Next slide. One of the next things that we're doing that we'll be introducing in the next few weeks is our microtransit pilot program. We're calling it the FRTA Access. We're launching this in the Greenfield Orange area, and we're going to be utilizing the existing vehicles we have to fill empty seats. This will be next day, same day service. It's also allowing us to expand on our demand response hours in this area, and this is made possible by using discretionary funds from last year. Next slide. So again, with this, I'd like to just, why are we looking outside of ourselves to create ways to provide a service when the only thing preventing us from doing this is funding? Again, we have the vehicles, we have the infrastructure, capital investments, we know our systems, our customers, we know what they want. Most importantly, we are subjected to every single audit and inspection you can think of. So, and lastly, last slide, what can you do? As Jeff said, ride the bus, be part of the solution. It may be challenging, but it's what we need. Know what's out there for service, educate yourself on what the transit options are, talk to the towns that you reside in to make them aware of the deficits or the needs in your area, and most importantly, advocate for transportation equality or equity. The RTAs need a statewide plan that doesn't involve discretionary funding, and more importantly, we need a statewide plan for 7-day-a-week service. Rail systems, ferry systems, and the T already have it. It's time that the RTAs are part of this discussion as well.
And now Dana Roscoe is the Manager of Transportation for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Okay, let's start with some audience participation. In the last 3 months, how many folks in the room have ridden a train? And we're going to talk just specifically about New England, or New York. So we're talking MBTA, we're talking Metro North, we're talking Amtrak. Show of hands. Wow, really, really good. Second question. In an ideal world where rail transportation was a viable option, would you be more inclined to go from Western Mass to Boston or Western Mass to New York? Show of hands for Boston. More than half the room. And for New York?
The other half.
So it was about 2/3, 1/3. Next slide. We're not advancing. Stop my time. Right, so I'm here to talk about 5 projects that I will share with you with slides. I really timed this well. I got out of here exactly in 5 minutes. Next slide. Okay, we're going to talk about 3 existing projects, Con River Line, CT Rail, and the Valley Flyer, and 2 projects under study. Next slide. If we start with the line going right through Northampton, service on that line continued through 1987. Track conditions required passenger service to be discontinued. In 1989, that service was reintroduced on a different alignment. Next slide. That alignment took us through Palmer. It added about 40 minutes to the trip. Here we see the train coming in, and what has to happen in Palmer is the train has to go from a north-south alignment to an east-west alignment, requiring a reverse move. So as we can see, the train literally stops in Palmer, but you can't get on or off. To our right here is the Steaming Tenders Restaurant, H.H. Richardson Building, former Palmer train station. Next slide. So we were successful in securing stimulus funding to rehab the Con River line. Here we see one of the last Amtrak trains traveling through North Amherst at Cushman Corner. Next slide. Next project we're going to talk about is south of us, the CT Rail. That service started in 2018. That is 16 new trips a day between New Haven and Hartford. 8 of those 16 continue on to Springfield. The original proposal was for all of those trips to continue to Springfield. Connecticut ran out of funding to do their double tracking when they got to Hartford. So as they're able to secure funding, we expect to see all 16 of those trains arriving in Springfield. Next slide. Next slide. As Senator Lesser mentioned, we were able to see the start on August 30th of the Valley Flyer. Prior to the Valley Flyer starting, there was just the one Amtrak train a day in the middle of the day, the Vermonter. This has added 4 new trains a day, 2 very early morning trips in the southbound direction and 2 evening trips in the northbound direction. As Senator Lesser mentioned, this is a 2-year pilot. Next slide. The first trip on the Valley Flyer was on the 30th. Here we are just after 6 o'clock here in Northampton, seeing the first train pull through on its way south. Next slide. Senator Lesser also mentioned east-west, and that is a study of passenger rail between Boston and Pittsfield. As Senator Lesser mentioned, there are 6 proposals currently under study. MassDOT is expected to get the 6 down to 2 or 3 more viable alternatives. This is the CSX line that's on this map. If we went north of Pittsfield up into the very corner of Massachusetts, we'd be in North Adams. Senator Comerford is also exploring a route that follows the Pan Am rail line from North Adams to Boston. Next slide. That is legislation that she has filed to take the existing MBTA service that currently stops in Fitchburg and Leominster and continues on to Gardner, Greenfield, and on to North Adams. Next slide. If you build it, they will come. In Amherst, when the Amtrak service was operating in Amherst, close to 18,000. Last year, that number had doubled. And if we look specifically at Northampton, we've gone from 17,000 riders in Northampton to 22,000 riders in Northampton in the last 3 years. Last slide. We look at folks in the greater Pioneer Valley that are currently without passenger rail options traveling to work in Boston. 4,300 folks in our area are currently working in Boston. What would the opportunity to be if we had viable passenger transportation? Thank you.
And our last lightning round is Gail Farnsworth-French talking about the Quabog Connector.
Good morning, everyone. What a lovely turnout. Can you hear me everywhere? Okay. In case I run a little over, if you're interested in the Quabog Connector, there are some of these on the table outside. Okay? But I hope not to. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers and the opportunity to participate this morning, our legislators, and our friends at T4MA. We appreciate their support as well. Quabog Connector, Community Transportation et al. I'm based in Ware at the Quabog Valley CDC. We are at the corner of Hamden, Hampshire, and Worcester counties. There's no public transit, hardly. There's a little bit from PVTA, thank you, Sandra, and we hope to do more. But people, if they don't have a car, can't get out to do what they need to do, and there's not a lot of jobs where we are. Next slide, please. So we started this little service in January of... thank you. I'm sorry. I'll just hold it. Yeah. In January of 2017, PVTA gave us 2 used vehicles, and off they went. We started with 22 rides that first month. In the month of July, we provided 1,022 rides. We're running in 9 communities. Next slide, please. And there they are. We added East Brookfield. We started with 8. We added East Brookfield because there's a court there. My organization is all about community development, and we feel that people can meet their court obligations and get back into the workforce. They are improving their economic situation. So next slide, please. So here's our background. No public transit, almost no service, no big employers. Very hard for businesses to find qualified local hires. And Hampshire County being the only county in the state without its own community college, we have brought HCC to Ware. But people have to travel to the locations that you see there. Several councils on aging have no vehicles at all in our region, and the rest, of course, have limited hours and often volunteer drivers. So more people are giving up driving and need a way to get around. Next slide, please. Thank you. This caused some raised eyebrows when we first shared this data. This is data based on the IRS 58 cents a mile travel time. If you're looking at these locations, now imagine if you're working a minimum wage job, or never mind a part-time job, how much of your time at the workplace do you spend just trying to cover your commute, then your child care, etc.? It is remarkably prohibitive for people. And that is the bottom line in terms of access for transportation, that transportation provides. Next slide, please. Okay, so we decided to start this. Our membership, our ridership has gone to almost 50 rides a day now. We just completed a satisfaction survey. I did the tallies yesterday in August of our riders. 2/3 of the people who completed our satisfaction survey have incomes below $20,000 a year. We have 5310 funding through the Community Transit Grant Association of program of MassDOT, so our priorities are seniors and persons with disabilities. The highest number of rides, however, are for people going to work. And the difference that it's made in those individuals' lives to be able to be reliable employees because they can get there all the time has been tremendous for them and their employers. 22% of our rides are for various kinds of health appointments. And yes, I had mentioned East Brookfield. Next slide, please. And that's that. How'd I do? Oh, I still have a minute.
So do we have time for questions? Yeah. Okay, so we have time for questions from those four, if anybody wants to ask a question. Anybody? Comments? Yes, go ahead.
State. Sorry, now you can finally hear me. My question is for Dana. Has there been any discussion about how to put that? I know that was like an interim line, but put a train back in for Amherst because of its importance.
Right. So our focus right now, as we look at East-West, is to keep Palmer on the map, and the station, I believe, in all 6 alternatives. Was included. So as we look at that east-west, our first order of business is get the station in Palmer. Our second order of business is how do we grow that station. Initially, we'll grow that station with bus service, and we know Town of 7 Railroads, we know that rail line does exist between Palmer and Amherst, and that opportunity is available to us.
We have one more question from Tom.
I'm a passionate fan of train travel, but the pricing is still prohibitive. And I see this happening, particularly with train travel, unfortunately with Amtrak, and I don't put it on the Amtrak people, but the pricing is still prohibitive to create the kind of scale of use necessary to allow us to stop driving to this place at that point. Whether I'm commuting to Springfield or I'm traveling to New York, I'm going to Boston. That needs to be an attractive price point for everyone to abandon their cars.
Right. So our original concept, our original proposal was to offer our own service. We went to Boston. We asked them for the surplus MBTA equipment so that we could operate our own service, what we're operating under Amtrak flag right now. For various reasons that didn't end up happening, and our only option ended up being contracting with Amtrak. Our difficulty contracting with Amtrak is not trying to sell a seat from Greenfield to Springfield. Amtrak is trying to sell a seat from Greenfield to New York or to Washington, and that's what their pricing is based on. They have made a concession and offered a 25% reduction for the first 6 weeks. We understand, we appreciate the difficulty with the pricing, and to the extent we can, we're working on it.
Thank you very much. And this parallels over in bus transportation, because if you want a direct run from Northampton to Springfield, and I have meetings down there, I've paid up to $18, $50, $19 for a one-way trip to Northampton
so that 18 or 19, that's an Uber trip?
No, that's Peter Pan.
Oh, Peter Pan.
Great. All right, so I'd like to call up the next round, and let's give the first round a big round of applause while they're coming up. Kate Babelock and Dave Christopoulos, Karen Christensen, Megan Rhodes, and Senator Adam Hines. We're going to start with Kate and Dave from the Hilltown Community Development Center, Transportation as a Community Response to a Human Service Need for Isolated Rural Seniors.
Thanks, that was pretty good. All right, how's it going? I'm Dave. I'm watching. I'm not going to say much. So Kate and I are going to split it here. And just to get really to the point, we're from Hilltown CDC are located in Chesterfield in the Hilltowns. We use the word Hilltowns a lot. I'm talking about kind of the central zone that we work in. We don't have a map for you, but we're the furthest from any of the cities, our location. So here's the basic deal. We see the problem is that we have no public transportation in the Hilltowns. What we see is an increase in the cost of living for our residents because of debt, maintaining cars, that kind of thing. Also, more cars on the road creates issues around the environment, and it would be good to deal with that. What the impact we're seeing, particularly on vulnerable populations, is seniors, people with disabilities, limited incomes can't always access transportation. So we're involved in part of the solution in the Hilltowns. Kate's going to tell you a little bit about that.
Oh, this is still yours.
No, it's still mine. It's an economic reality. I can't help myself. Go back. All right, I can't. Yeah. Yeah. So similar to the public utilities, which we have challenges of our infrastructure. This is my opinion, okay? Public policy has not been successful in steering the free market enterprise to invest in our rural communities, nor do we really have adequate subsidies from the government to fill the gaps in this kind of profit-driven system we see in transportation. So what's our local strategy? It's community power through rural advocacy and local collaboration. So what you're going to hear a little bit about is who we've been working with in the Hilltowns to make it happen and a little bit of what we're doing around providing transportation to folks who really need it.
Okay, next slide. So this was, I put this slide together asking why is a community development agency operating transportation? But we've already had the Quabog Community Development Agency up here, and Senator Lesser made the same point. Why is the food bank putting together this forum? It's because it's needed, because we hear it from the community, because it's come to us rather than us going out and looking and saying, hey, we want to operate transportation. We do a Helping Elders network. We're in the homes of senior citizens. We know their needs. We have affordable housing. And the model of the RTA's funding demand response vehicles to the Councils on Aging does not work very well in towns of our size, where the Council on Aging staff is one person who's funded at 5 or 10 hours a week. So we took it on to do this for our community. Our approach at first, the same way you get to Harvard, we did a big study in 2016. We identified exactly what was going wrong, where people needed to go, and what issues the seniors were faced with. We've evolved a bit since then beyond basic demographics. We really are trying to get to the point, as Dave said, of why the rural communities are left out. What is the underlying dynamic that makes rural seniors in particular a forgotten component and grossly underserved component of our society? I won't go through the study. It's a well-needed document of people who cannot get to medical appointments, and if they are lucky enough to get a neighbor's ride to get to the doctor's office or the grocery store, then they won't dare ask for a ride to actually visit a friend, and so they become increasingly isolated in poor health and unable to get what they need. Next slide. So in 2017, we took over the FRTA contract for a demand response vehicle in 5 of our northern Hilltowns. We call it the Hilltown Easy Ride, and we are able to serve seniors and veterans in 5 of those towns. It's been I consider it a tremendous success. We've grown. We've served almost everybody who needs a ride for a medical appointment. There are some limitations, of course. funding doesn't match demand, wah, wah, cry me a river. Everybody in the room is probably in that same situation. And then there are restrictions on the use of the van. We launched a supplemental program this year with some 5310 funding and Mass Council on Aging grant for seniors to be served to supplement for medical rides in personal vehicles. That is, difficult to do. It's similar to some of the volunteer programs, although we're paying the drivers, but it does help us out. So we're really patching together a network of programs. Dave, do you want to talk about the challenges then?
Yeah, I like a duet. I like a duet more than a solo, All right. Well, here's some of the challenges that we're dealing with. We clearly need political will to make this happen. That's always challenging. There are a lot of competing things that we got to deal with. Transportation metrics of efficiency and cost per passenger per mile always work against us. We live in a sparsely populated area. The numbers don't work in this type of economy. It's just the way it is. Financial sustainability, supplemental grants and state and federal budgets. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're doing everything we can to cob it together. There's not a comprehensive funding mechanism for this type of stuff. We're trying to meet the needs of the community, and clearly there's major environmental concerns when it comes to transportation. I can't even count the amount of cars in this country. I have no idea. It's got to be, I don't know, millions, hundreds of millions.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. You can see what works. It's really about working together. That's really the main thing there, right?
Okay, next we will have Catherine Rattay talking about Valley Bike Share. That's me. And I'm going to be really fast because I want to get us back on track. And I would have had our participating communities do the presentation, but they're all meeting on another topic today. So Valley Bike Share is the pedal assist electric bike sharing program in 6 of the communities in the Pioneer Valley, and we would love to expand. We've been thinking about bike share for a long time at the regional level. The municipalities had been thinking about it, and we were able to come together. For practical reasons, I want to tell you how we did it. So district local technical assistance funding, all of your regional planning agencies have access to that. We used it to study how to do a regional bike share for a couple of years, and then we got CMAQ money, congestion mitigation, air quality, to pay for a big portion of the physical costs of the actual bikes. And then we had businesses who paid to sponsor the bike share station, $12,000 a year, that helps with the costs. So again, if you want to replicate it, we would love to work with you. We did a very thoughtful process to figure out where we should locate the stations based on people coming and going. We think of this as a transportation, it's mobility. It's not just for fun. It's to get people out of cars, to fill that last mile in transit, make it so you don't have to have a car, and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And again, I talked about the funding. We're on line right now for another round of congestion mitigation air quality funds, and if we get it, we're going to expand to Hadley, Chicopee, and West Springfield, so it's going to be this whole giant corridor, and we would love to get it up into Franklin and over to Berkshire. And there's lots of issues, but we're working together to resolve them all. And now we're back to trains with Karen Christensen.
Boy, that was so fast. Do I get the extra time? Okay, next slide. The saying, think globally, act locally, has been my mantra since I wrote my first environmental book in London in 1989. So it's appropriate that the train campaign began when I came back. Next slide. Came back from a trip to China and found that a new effort was underway to revive the Housatonic or Berkshire line. I wrote about it, I got a big response, and the train campaign was born. These are my employees dragged out in the snow for our first photo shoot. Next slide. I'm talking today about the Housatonic or Berkshire line. This project, called the Housatonic Passenger Rail Service, was ranked #1 just recently in the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission's 2020 Regional Transportation Plan. Like other projects we're talking about today, our aim is to restore passenger service on a present-day freight line. The Berkshire line has had passenger service from 1838 till 1971, when, like many passenger services across the country, it was shut down. Next slide. Yep. All right. Well, this. Okay. This will this will be online. This is relevant to everyone, it's just a clip. Anyway, this is from there was a 35-minute documentary made about the last run to Pittsfield in 1971. We're going to be showing that around the region soon. In the right-hand corner, that's Engineer Pete at the window. Next slide, please. A lot has happened since I started the train campaign. Are we giving up on it? Oh, okay. A lot has happened since I started the train campaign. This infographic presents a study by a Williams College professor showing nearly $1 billion in economic boost to the Berkshires over 10 years from the revived Berkshire line. Next slide, please. With colleagues in Connecticut, our online petitions garnered nearly 10,000 signatures. There was much excitement about this line. In 2014, the Commonwealth bought the 37 miles of track in Massachusetts with the explicit intention of restoring passenger service. Another $240,000 was spent to work out where the stations should be located. Next slide, please. Then came a new governor and new DOT with a lack of interest in rail and, we think, a lack of interest in Western Massachusetts. But in spite of that, upgrades began in 2018. This photo shows modern welded rail, 36-pound rail, waiting to be installed in Great Barrington. That's true all along the line in Massachusetts. When the work is done, we will have tracks that can support passenger trains. This $48 million of spending is only good for the freight company that runs freight trains on this line at the moment. It needs to benefit citizens. Next slide, please. We also have the challenge of climate change in mind. It's worth noting that low-lying rail lines near seacoast and along the Hudson are already the subject of climate resilience planning, and we should take account of climate issues too, even at higher elevations. Next slide, please. We have been amassing footage for a new film, adding a vision for the future to that 1971 film. Here we are interviewing Engineer Pete. Next slide, please. This is a map of a huge visionary project called Rebooting New England. You can see how, we'll see if this works too, this is another technical thing, how we in Western Massachusetts are marginalized. We're invisible, but if we click, all right, there, look it, here we are. And in fact, the Rebooting New England folks have already added the Housatonic line to their 2019 map. I'm pleased to say. Next slide. The train campaign has been making Connecticut connections for years and is newly active with new developments underway in Danbury and New Milford. Just last week, $1 million start on the reopening of one section of the line was announced, and Mayor Mark Boughton of Danbury has offered to host a Massachusetts and Connecticut summit in Danbury. Let's bring back the trains.
Thank you, and we will try to have the video played during the break. Now, Megan Rhodes from the Franklin Regional Council of Governments.
So I'm a senior transportation planner at the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. We're located in Greenfield in Franklin County, which is the most rural county in the state, which means that we have transportation challenges, which we've all heard about today, so I won't go into them. But I will say for transportation challenges, in addition to having no weekend, no evening services, we also have no ride-sharing services. At this point in time, we have maybe 1 to 2 Uber or Lyft drivers that operate out of Amherst and occasionally come up to the southern part of the county. So we even have fewer options than a lot of the other regions here in the Pioneer Valley and Western Massachusetts. So bottom line, if you don't have a car, you're in big trouble. So what can we do? The FERCOG believes that we're going to need to do innovation, and we're going to rely on the provision of more choices. We can't just rely on the traditional model of big buses on fixed routes throughout the region. While that's helpful connecting the big population centers, there's a lot of people that live elsewhere. And so we're going to, luckily, technology is advancing really fast, and it's allowing us to have more options, including bicycle sharing, microtransit, ride sharing. And we believe that those choices need to be in partnership with our public transit authorities. We're always going to have a need for public transit, so we shouldn't be competing against them. We should be working in partnership with them to create a comprehensive system of transit for the region. So in the topic of increasing choices for the region, Senator Comerford has secured some funding for us in the recent budget to begin a rideshare demonstration project in Franklin County. We haven't started yet. This is a future project, but we're going to begin work on this fall to get together a consortium of regional social service agencies that provide services in Franklin County. And we're hoping to get them to help provide subsidized rides using rideshare services, either Uber, Lyft, or some other company that we partner with. And it's going to fill those critical gaps that we have in Franklin County. No weekends, no evening services, and sometimes people during the day, when there is services, people can't access those fixed route services. So we're hoping that this rideshare service is going to supplement our transit authority, get them to the fixed routes, or when the fixed routes aren't running, to fill those gaps. What's next? Let's see. So we're going to begin planning this fall. We're going to create a partnership with agencies around the region. We're not quite sure what that makeup's going to look like, and how it quite operates. It's going to depend on the makeup of the agencies that partner with us. Our hope is that those agencies are going to be able to contribute some funding to the program so that it's a sustainable long-term program. This is being modeled after a program in the East, which GATRA helped start, and that has become a sustainable program with contributions from agencies and also donations and subsidies from other places. But it has become a long-term program, and that's our hope here as well. We're also going to work with Uber and Lyft, whichever one we end up going, to bring more drivers to the region, also train drivers through our workforce training programs so that our supply will meet the demand for the region. Next slide. So briefly, how we think it's going to work is the social service agencies are going to be able to schedule the rides for their clients. They can schedule rides in advance. So if we know someone has a class 3 days a week that ends at 10 o'clock when there's no services at the Franklin County Technical School, they might be able to schedule those rides in advance so they can get home. They also don't have to worry about having a credit card or a phone, which is an obstacle and a barrier for a lot of our low-income populations. So by having the social services schedule the rides, then they will be able to track the type of rides, who gets them, where they're going, and we'll have information for for travel patterns, things like that we can then use later. Next slide. Finally, just so we're hoping at the end of this project, we'll create a final report that'll have our lessons learned, how we can scale this. Right now, this is going to be a demonstration with just the social service agencies in the region, but we're hoping that with the lessons learned, we can then be able to know how to expand it to other groups and populations in the region. And as I mentioned, we'll be able to track travel patterns so that if we see a lot of people are coming from a housing complex and going to the hospital, maybe instead of providing rideshare services, maybe we can do a more efficient service like provide a shuttle or reroute the fixed route service for that. So hopefully with this, we'll have lessons learned, some gaps filled, and we'll be able to have a more comprehensive system for the region. Thanks.
Our final lightning round speaker is Senator Hines.
All right. Nothing like going last after everyone's been through an hour and 40 minutes of PowerPoint presentations. Thanks for organizing this, all of you, and thanks for being here, because honestly, addressing the issues that we've been talking about, it's going to take all of us locking elbows and being very strategic. I represent the 52 westernmost towns in Massachusetts, and so it's 2 towns in Hampden, the 9 western towns in Hampshire, and the 9 westernmost towns in Franklin, and then of course all of Berkshire County. And so from that perspective, our vision of what we're trying to address has been highlighted a couple of times today. One is, of course, this winner-take-all economy with a lot of the jobs moving to the East thriving, the East getting the resources when it comes to infrastructure, and of course us not getting the investments in broadband internet, not getting the investments in transportation that we need, and on and on and on. And surprise, surprise, we see our health outcomes worse, our education attainment worse, our family median household income worse, etc. And so I think one of the big priorities has been, well, what are we going to do about it? I want to talk briefly about the Berkshire Flyer, briefly about an internal Berkshire County transportation initiative, and kind of take some lessons about the value of a regional approach, right? Very quickly, the initiative with the Berkshire Flyer follows very nicely with the years and years and tireless work that Karen has been doing to bring attention to the need for rail in Berkshire County, so we thank her for that. When I came into office 3 years ago, my first meeting request was DOT, what's going on with the line? They unfortunately said, we're running into obstacles. Connecticut at that point, and since then had said, we're not going to invest in this rail portion, and so they said, well, we can't invest the $100 million for passenger level. A lot of this development has been for freight because they anticipated it was $200 million in upgrades. So we said, are there alternatives? And kind of like water flowing around a rock, we learned of a route with existing passenger rail from Manhattan to Albany and then over to Pittsfield. And so in a matter of 2 years, we've gone from an idea to a pilot that's starting in June. And this year we have $370,000 so that we can do the marketing, operate with Amtrak, and hire somebody to do a lot of the work. The purpose is it's weekend seasonal service, so it's Friday to Sunday, essentially. You come up on Friday, you go down on Sunday. It's modeled after the Cape Flyer. You can see a theme here, and then now we have the Valley Flyer, really original naming, branding. But it is seasonal weekend service, June to October, with the intention of showing that there's demand, showing that we need to make these major investments, showing that this is going to be, that we need daily, year-round, and multiple times a day service between our major economic center, New York City. And that, of course, goes alongside with connecting us to the Valley, connecting us to Boston, right? These are all happening at the same time. What's exciting is that this is now the fourth major rail initiative to get on track, as it were. And especially once the northern tier of Senator Comerford that study gets underway in a year. And so maybe I'll stop there for that. The second piece, of course, has been, by the way, I didn't say this, but right now we're finalizing the contracts, and so we anticipate June of 2020 is when it starts for 2 or 3 years to be determined. And the same problems of, thank you. We like to support each other in the Senate, don't we, Joe? Of course, the same problems, the price, costs, the time, the day, et cetera, that we're going to be grappling with Amtrak in a very nice way. The other challenge I wanted to talk about is, of course, this: how do you move around the region? And what you hear today is this articulation that we need nothing short of reinventing how we do rural transportation. We simply have to change the way we go about this, working with our RTAs. And so we've been working with Bob in the BRTA, and we had a little bit of money in last year's budget so that we could explore what does it mean to use all of the transportation assets that are moving around the county and the region at one time. How can they speak to each other technologically or otherwise? How do we have a banner above it so that we don't get into problems of funding that restricts, well, that's only for seniors, you can't do that, or that's only for schools, but it's outside of school hours, and be very creative in using all of these transportation seats moving around a region in an area where folks, clearly we don't have the concentration of population, but we do have a concentration of assets in a broader space. And so those meetings are underway. They're going to be putting out a bid for a vendor to say, what is the technology we need? What are the obstacles we need to overcome to really, like I say, reinvent it? I'm going to end with a point that ultimately all this requires a regional vision. Right? We talk about this a lot. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier if we're going to Boston and saying, we have a vision for rail in Western Mass, and that's why we need those hundreds of millions of dollars, because it's going to shift the state, the dynamics of the state. Absent that vision, it's very easy for the projects to be pitted against each other by agencies, by administration officials. Absent that vision, we miss out on key parts of the state and of the region. And so I think if I leave one message, it's let's be abundantly clear, and hopefully this can even come out of the process today, about what we are standing for. And it can be a grand vision, but it has to have a vision. And so I look forward to doing that work around the tables after this. Thanks, everyone.
So we have time for a few questions for the next round of this last round of panelists. Does anybody have any questions? Please speak really loudly because I can't get the microphones out to you. Anybody? Comment? Yes.
Seems like
vested interests that are counterproductive to changing the transportation means, like the bus services and some of the local taxi services even. They speak loudly that we're robbing them of their livelihood, and yet the greater good doesn't respond enough. So is there something we can do from a public relations, governmental standpoint that will speak for the greater good rather than the economic interests that are already being protected? Who would like to answer?
No, it's a good point. My view is it's a multimodal. We talk about from the long distance to the micro transit. It's all of the above, and so we all win when we make these big investments. But clearly, you're saying pitting trains and buses. And so I think, again, we have such momentum right now around trains right now that for the environmental reasons and a whole range of others that I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah, I don't have a question so much as a comment to Senator Hines. And because there's a lot of rail advocates in the room, my husband, Ben Hood, we're from Citizens for a Palmer Rail Stop, and we've been working on the East-West initiative for, I think, it's close 4 or 5 years now. And we noticed after that Trains in the Valley came in, and then Karen was already out in the train campaign. And so what we did is we created the Western Mass Rail Coalition, which is fairly new. I don't have a card for it, but our flyer, which is on the table, mentions it, and Karen's nicely hosting it. And so we came at it with the same attitude that you just mentioned, which was rather than having competing train initiatives, we could work together to bring a coordinated rail to the whole region.
And I'll just say it's westernmassrail.org, and there are links there to the different organizations. There's also a consolidated news feed of all the newsletters from each of our organizations, which is a really handy. It's a lot faster than trying to move from site to site. We hope that'll be useful.
All right, we'll take one more comment from in the back. Go ahead. Yeah. Right.
So I think we're going to need some help from our legislators. I think we're going to need to join together to take a good look at these MOUs and see if they're fair to Western Mass.
That is a perfect segue into the final piece of this morning's forum workshop. So we're going to cut the break to 5 minutes, and I hope take as much time as you need, obviously, but hopefully you can come back. And each of the tables have numbers, and I believe you were assigned to a number when you registered. So please go to the table that has the number when you come back. And this is our chance as a group to work on whatever topics you heard today that you want to help solve. Our goal is to make this a year-long effort where we all work together to solve some of the key problems. Table 6 is in the lobby, so if you don't see table 6, it's because it's out there. And again, then we'll all come back together to hear a quick report out. There are no topics assigned to you. A legislator is at your table, a transportation expert is at your table, and you all get to decide where you're going to focus your energy. Okay, everybody, I'm sorry this is happening so fast. We are now going to turn our attention to hearing what you all were able to accomplish in that short period of time. Can somebody bring in group number 6? Who wants to go first for the report out? Which group? Raise your hand. Anybody want to go first for the report out? Great.
So we mentioned PBTA is the largest regional transit authority in the state.
So we have to look at how to connect all of those. We need to be both person-centered and rider-centered. We talked a lot about the comments Tina from Franklin Regional Transit Authority made about the desire to have a fair fee transit system, and how, while there are many obstacles to overcome to get it, that other areas have done it, so why can't we? Because it reduces the barrier for people for entry. It can increase ridership, it can promote ridership, which then helps those performance measures that the state is looking to have. So, next page.
We gotta go off
we need to come up with more creative financing options so that we can implement many of these ideas for capital and operating.
Thank you.
Good, okay. So what excited us most about the lightning rounds, I think was a common theme, was the united voice, the diversity of organizations taking risks and being creative. Great regional coordination, a four-county united voice, and also diverse means of transportation being explored, both public and private. In the second question, it was sort of what work initiatives. We talked a lot about a focused strategy, coordinating across stakeholders and advocates. Also really using a lot of time and energy to expose the benefits for both the East and the West. It's sort of a one Massachusetts approach. If it helps us, it helps you. If it helps you, it helps us. Solutions versus values, too. Not settling for solutions that also inadvertently contradict our own values about safe environments and global warming and other issues that we might have. A shift from an auto-centric to public transport mindset. Also, an increase of resources and funding from that whole idea of maintaining to being able to give some forward momentum. And also resources for infrastructure and personnel so that we can make these changes. Coordinating service and plans across multiple transportation providers.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. I really hate rushing people.
Okay, Andrew was most excited about the FERPOB Uber type transportation system, and thinking it will provide visual connections for all users and make a real regional networking system. So we took that on to look at the inventory of all transportation providers, capacity, and look at unused capacity where it exists, and then use technology to really connect all of these systems and make it really rider focused rather than or person focused rather than system focused, and get out of the silo based system to make a system for everyone. So
that's perfect. Thank you. While I'm running over there, if you want to join the RTA Advocates Coalition, see Andrew Freeman from NPHA. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a community member in Northampton and Florence. And we spoke a lot of things that we're passionate about and not so much about solutions. We have a lot of, coming from the ground up, being a rider, there's a lot of things that are working against us using these systems. And so we're very passionate about expanding the transportation and improving, we know what this improves. We've seen and I've experienced personally what this improves, like health outcomes, social, economic, and racial justice and economic outcomes are big old words that people threw at me, but really like the heart of it is that like it removes isolation. And for a lot of our members in our community, it can lessen suicidality. You know, it can get us to places where we can get our needs met: food, emotional needs, spiritual support, and doctors, and social.
It's a big place for social riding the transit, you know, and it's an opportunity to talk to people from all over the place, you know, and it's eye-opening. There's a lot of racial justice just going on in the transit by itself because people are interacting from a common need, and that really opens people up.
You got to really be very, very short because we want to give a chance for Senator Comerford to wrap us all up.
No, I think Representative.
Oh, Representative Sanders, sorry.
Okay, very short and sweet. Our table focused on the need to collaborate between agencies and regions, that a range of solutions is needed, and that we need to link our transportation future to the climate change, reducing emissions. So those are our three priorities.
Way to go.
Very small group, but we're just going to do everything Megan just said. That's basically our conversation on remodel room as well.
So I won't repeat what everyone else said, but I just wanted to point out that everyone was very excited about the amount of leadership there is here in Western Massachusetts for actually addressing these issues. But I think one of the things we kind of really focused on is that, you know, it's not that there haven't been really good transportation solutions here in Western Massachusetts. They actually existed in the late 1800s up until the early 1900s. The infrastructure is here. The opportunities are here. It's just a matter of kind of bringing those back and thinking about what it was like in a time before cars, what we did to actually approach how to address, you know, the isolation that people are now actually facing because they don't have access to cars. I think the only other key point to actually point out is that this is not just a Western Mass issue or a Massachusetts issue, but it's a multi-state issue. And what kind of things can we be thinking about so that states throughout the New England actually collaborate on regional transportation?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Trevor Woodman. We were particularly excited about the comprehensiveness of the topics that were brought to the table today and the partnerships and networking we have access to. Some of the key points that we came up with is increased utilization of existing resources, perhaps school buses and transportation for people with disabilities. They have set schedules, and in between, there's a lot of time where those resources are not being used. We're particularly interested in the rideshare demonstration project in Franklin County, keeping costs low, expanding partnerships, looking at subsidization of those for the drivers. Bus passes for individuals in recovery were discussed as a great intervention. And one of our people at the table said, we're inventing the future right here today. And I thought that was a great way to talk about this. Cross-country county access to transportation. And then finally, standing firm with our legislatures to work towards greater funding for these projects.
Group 6, we were relegated to the hallway, but nonetheless, the things I would add that Morgan already said was we talked about human service transportation, increasing funding for that, and also expanding the accessibility to different vendors, let more people get into that game. We talked about the use of school buses during downtime that could be an option, and then perhaps most importantly, one of the things our group was most impressed with was the way our legislative delegation works together as a shared vision and speaks with one voice. So thank you very much. Bring us home. Bring us home.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I want to just go over our sponsors again, who helped put on this event. So first of all, Bay State Health, Transportation for Massachusetts, or T for Mass as we don't call it, Live Well Springfield, and the Massachusetts Public Health Institute, Cooley Dickinson Hospital, the Coalition to End Hunger, and the UMass School of Public Health and Health Sciences. I also want to thank again everyone who helped plan this forum, the legislators who all speak with one voice, hopefully not one brain, but one voice, and everyone who spoke at the lightning round today. I would like to remind you that when you come to these forums, your participation is important, but what you do afterwards is even more important. And on that note, on all of your tables, there are sheets where you can sign up to participate in continued discussions and working groups. So if you haven't already signed up, please do so. I'd like to remind you also that there are evaluation forms in your package, and we would love to hear what you thought of this forum today. And because I do believe that not only do you need to come and advocate, you need to organize, I'm going to remind you that transportation is deeply related to climate change. And that this afternoon is the 10th annual Chalk Festival in Northampton. We will be hosting a chalk-in behind Thorns, and it will be environmentally themed. You should come, bring your kids of all ages, and participate in that. Also, next week is the climate strike, and that is going to be on the 20th. Go to Boston, show up, come to Northampton. We're marching from Sheldon Field downtown, 4:30 to around 5. There's a whole day of events. You should participate, because the voices in this room that understand how transportation is related to climate are important, and we need you to be there.
Where do you our evaluations? Laura? You can leave them on the table.
So you can leave your evaluation forms on the table. I look forward to seeing all of you again soon.